Our next speaker is getting ready. Blake Nancarrow will talk to us about double stars, unnoticed treasures.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Blake Nancarrow, and I wanted to talk about double stars this evening. If you know me, you know that I really enjoy observing these particular targets. And I've noticed something, I think, it's not my imagination, that they seem to be not frequently referred to. So I'm a little bit concerned that some people aren't observing these or enjoying them. So I wanted to share some of that this evening. Andy, great presentation on the sky this month, and I'll give you some credit. You did refer to a binary star. But I've noticed in some of our What's Up This Month presentations that there's little or no reference to double stars, and I've thought that kind of curious. When in many cases there are references to variable stars and to asteroid occultations, which I think are pretty challenging to do. The Astronomical League, the kind of analogous organization to the RASC, the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, the AL in the US, they have double star observing programs where you can get a certificate. And we don't have that in Canada. To be fair, there are some references to double stars in RASC materials and programs. The Explore the Universe certificate, one of the first certificates that people might pursue with RASC, there's some double stars on that. So that's good. I like that we get people thinking about that pretty early in their astronomy career. And certainly the Observer's Handbook. This has a couple of references, a couple of tables of double stars in it. So that's great. But there's no certificate program. Again, these aren't mentioned in some talks. I looked in the journal, the RASC journal, and I went back 10 years, and I only found one article. And it was kind of a happenstance thing. Alistair Ling was doing an asteroid occultation, or a lunar occultation, and he stumbled across a double star in that. So I'm kind of curious about increasing awareness or heightening awareness about this. And partly I want to encourage you, if you don't normally consider these targets, that you might view them, add them to your observing campaigns, view them, and maybe keep some notes about that. I wanted to clarify some terminology or wording, because I think it's a little bit casual, a little bit loose. What is a double star? This image here of Albireo, this is what I think a lot of people have seen or think of when they consider double stars. And certainly the definition of double means, we all know, means twin or a pair of things. Albireo, while a good example of a sort of typical double star, is actually a multistar system, and clearly the stars are unequal. They're different colors and they're different brightnesses, but still that's a great example of a double star. But I think the word double is used very casually. You'll find lists of double stars, but they have triples, and maybe the odd quadruple system is listed in that. And that's certainly true in some of the RASC tables that they refer to some triples. Triples are pretty common, actually. You can get 4 or 5 companions in some double star listings, which brings up also the designation, or the way that we sort of classify the individual members. We simply use letters, capital letters. A usually refers to the primary or the brightest star. B is the secondary star, C and D, and so on. If you can make it out in that image, though, if you look closely, you'll notice that the C star super faint, where the D and the F stars are brighter. And there's a gap. Not all the letters are used in that example image. That's the Multistar System Auto Struve 457, and it's got some interesting lettering patterns in it. So to me, there's no rhyme or reason per se for the lettering system, but that's the convention that we use to identify all the individual members. Adrian's photo of the Great Orion Nebula that we were looking at a few moments ago, you saw in the middle of it, he pointed out trapezium, and that's a multi-star system that many people have looked at. That one's sort of fun to look at low power, because you'll see the 4 stars. We could see the 4 stars in your photo there very nicely. But if you use higher power, you've got good observing conditions, there's 6 members that can be viewed in that system. And I've been fortunate to see that on some occasions. You can get extreme scenarios with multi-star systems. I took this image with the Burke-Gaffney Observatory automated telescope in Halifax of the 37 cluster. This is an open cluster, and it's also considered a multi-star system. It's Struve 848, and every one of those stars that make up the digit there, they're all members of this multi-star system. So in a lot of open clusters, you get double stars. Maybe there's a bunch of individual pairs in that, or all of the members in that loose open cluster are considered a multi-star system. So a lot of variety, a lot of different sort of arrangements of all these. My point is that you can have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 15 or 20 stars in a multi-star system. And a lot of people will just call that a double star system. The term, again, is used very, very casually. And I tend to use double stars just very casually when I'm observing all of these types of objects, just because it's easier than saying, hey, do you want to go outside and observe double stars and triples and trinaries and quadruple systems and quintuple systems and some multi-star systems tonight? Well, it's clear. It's just a bit of a mouthful to go through all of that. A lot of times I'm asked at star parties if the members of a double star or a multi-star system are interacting, if they're related in some way, and they may be. But sometimes you get this. You just get a chance alignment of 2 stars. So the A star in that image is in the foreground, as it were. It's relatively close to the Earth. Say it's 100 light years away. And the B star is 200 light years away. You can have stars that are light years apart, maybe on different sides of the galaxy. But when we look at them through a telescope or binoculars, they're perfectly lined up. So you get chance alignments there. Those are referred to as optical double stars, and they're fun to look at, but they're not involved or they're not part of a system. You can get stars, though, that are very close together, like those stars in an open cluster. They might be a couple of light years apart, and they may be gravitationally interacting. We can determine that if we repeatedly look at the members of a multi-star system and we measure their proper motion, where they're moving through space. And if all the members, all the stars in an open cluster show the same proper motion, they're physically related. They're a system. But if stars are really close together, we're talking less than a light year, maybe astronomical units apart, there may be some interesting situations where, in fact, you get stars that orbit one another. So that's officially a binary double star system in that case when you get a star orbiting another star. They're gravitationally bound, one orbits the other, or they orbit around a common center of gravity. We can get complex systems there. You can get 2 binaries that orbit each other, and then the 2 pairs orbit each other. There's more and more complex arrangements that we're seeing. But binary is a term that's often used to refer to 2 stars. And that example there that I'm showing you is a plot of the B star of Castor orbiting the A primary star. A neat thing about this is that some binary orbits are fast. They have short periods, maybe less than 100 years. There's some that are 50 or 60 years. So that means if you return to, some of these or revisit some of these binary systems, you'll notice how they're changing over time. You'll see a change in their position or their distance from one another. So that's a neat thing about double stars as well, that some of these are dynamic. And that can actually be measured, but I'll leave that for another day. One of the things that, to me, is very attractive about double stars is their color. And the color is real. It's color that you can see with your eye. Don't get me wrong, I like deep sky objects. I like looking at galaxies. I like looking at faraway stuff. But a lot of times when we look at a galaxy through the telescope, it's a faint fuzzy. It's a gray, fuzzy kind of object. Or maybe there's a hint of color in it, but nothing major. But you look at double stars, and they're clearly very colorful. You see that right away. And that can make for a real sort of wow factor. That's part of the reason why I encourage people to include double stars in their observing lists at star parties. It's low-hanging fruit. It's eye candy. A lot of people really enjoy that. You can get some very strange color descriptions if you read some books or observing lists. You get some fantastic descriptions that might raise some eyebrows. Colors, of course, are very subjective. If you consider the stellar classification chart, we know that we can get blue, white, hot stars, O-class and B-class stars, and we can go all the way down to K and M class, and then beyond that, C-class stars that are very orangey and red. And when you get two of these right beside each other, it's fantastic. There's some really cool color combinations that you can get. You may know that our sun is a G-class star, so it's by itself it might appear white, but you put it beside a blue or a red star and you go, oh, that G-class star has a bit of a yellow cast or a lemon kind of color or something like that. So colors are fun with double stars. An interesting thing to me, but it also can be a very challenging thing about double stars, is how close or far apart they are from one another. So you know that we measure things in the celestial sphere in our night sky using angular measurement. We use degrees, minutes, and seconds. And a lot of double star lists will indicate how far away the stars are from one another, and they're usually measured in arc seconds, which is the smaller measurement. But when casually observing double stars, usually my first impressions are words like wide or attractively close or very close. And in some cases, you get double stars that are so close together, given the way that you're viewing them, the equipment that you're using, if anything, you'll get double stars that are so close to each other that they appear to be touching. Those descriptions that I'm showing you are from a book that I'll mention a bit later, but you can see that up near the top we've got two stars so close together that they're just blending in. They look like a figure eight or a snowman. Adrian was talking about his photographs and how he uses his guiding camera to try and keep the stars pinpoint. But sometimes you'll get guiding errors in a photograph. If you are imaging some objects and you get a little guiding error, all your stars might be stretched. They might look rod-shaped or like a figure eight. But if you see one star that's going in a different direction, that it's stretched in a different direction, you might have found a very close double star. I encourage people to, always keep log notes. I know Mr. Markov is a big fan of that. So if you're keeping logs for your observations, consider some of that terminology, using that in your logbook to describe the stars. Note the colors and note how close or far away they are from another. Or you might refer to the gap between them, that they're split by a hair or split by a black line. And there's no prize or trophy at the end of this. So there might be an instance where you're trying to look at a particularly interesting double star or a highly recommended one, and you may not be able to split them. And it might be because you're using very low power, or it's low on the horizon, or the sky's just bad. You have poor conditions. So that's okay. Write that in your logbook. I could not split this pair on this date, and you can try again later. Something that can be challenging when trying to split double stars is the difference in the brightness of the individual members. That previous image that I showed you, those two stars, I made them the exact same color and brightness. But that's rare that you get that. A lot of times the stars are quite different. This is an illustration and an artist rendering of Sirius and its companion star, the white dwarf star on the right, that little bright blue pinpoint of light, which some people casually call the pup. So Sirius A and Sirius B are really hard to split just because the B is so dim. It may be lost in the glare. So if you get really dramatically different brightnesses of stars, it can be challenging to separate them. That's something I enjoy. That's one of the sort of challenge aspects of double star observing, is being able to see a faint companion beside a bright star. In general, if the stars are equal brightness, they can be extremely close together, and you'll be able to split them. But if they're very different magnitudes, in general, they'll have to be further apart. There's actually some formulas that people have developed to try and sort of predict that. But that's something I'll note in my logbook again, that maybe I couldn't split them because they're very difficult to see beside each other. I don't know if you have an occulting eyepiece, but some people may have built or purchased an occulting eyepiece that's got a bar in it or something like that to block part of the field. So if you do have an occulting eyepiece, which is often used for planets, you could maybe use that on a double star that's got a bright member. Did you, Adrian, did your partner want to know where you're going to put all that telescope equipment? Did you take over the dining room or the living room?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So of course we need more telescopes, right? There's no one telescope that's good at everything, right? So you have to have all the different types and so some people actually say that there are some telescopes that are better than others for double star observing, and I say it doesn't matter, run what you brung. All telescopes will work for viewing double stars, and if you don't have a telescope, don't think you have to rush out and buy one to look at double stars. There's a couple dozen double stars that you can see with your naked eye. If you have binoculars, regular 7x50 binoculars, you can increase the number of stars that you can see to something like 100,000 stars. And a good portion of those are double or multi-star systems. So as soon as you have binoculars, you're now getting into the hundreds of candidates. And if you have a telescope and an eyepiece or two, and it can be a small telescope, you're now getting into the thousands of double stars that you can see. If you read the opening paragraph in the Observer's Handbook, it says that approximately 85% of stars are doubles or multi-star systems. So when you look at all the stars that you can see in the night sky with your eye, they look like singles in most cases, but then as soon as you put some power or amplification on it, they're multi-star systems. And many of those are binary systems. So again, it doesn't matter what equipment that you have. If you do have a telescope, though, and you've got a few eyepieces, that is great. You're in a good position to look at double stars at different magnifications. And a lot of people will say you shouldn't use magnifications that go beyond about 200 or 300 power with your telescope because the atmosphere won't allow that. You can break that rule when you're doing double star observing. I've used 500 power and 600 power in some cases to try and identify where one of those faint companion is. And then I'll drop the power back down when I know where it is, and sometimes I've been able to easily see a companion. So you get to use all your dusty old eyepieces that you didn't think you could use. So use all magnifications, use all the equipment that you've got. So that's kind of fun. Over time, your living room will look like this. a neat thing about double star observing, and Andy also knows this with his variable star observing, that you can do this anytime. Because we're talking about stars, so that means we're talking about point sources, and that means that beam of photons can punch through light pollution and mediocre sky conditions. You don't need perfect skies, and you don't need to drive for 2 or 3 hours to get in the country, and you don't have to wait for a new moon phase. You can do double star observing anytime you want. Ideally, in a perfect world, you want good seeing. You want stable air to be able to split very tight double stars. But I don't sit around and wait for that. If I have a clear night, or ideally a couple of clear nights, I want to get out and do some double star observing, even if the moon's out. You know, I just love the moon. When there's new moon phases, when there's no moonlight around, I look at a combination of objects, a lot of deep sky objects, and I'll have a couple of double stars for that evening campaign. But when the moon's out, I'll be looking almost exclusively at double stars. Where can you observe? Anywhere. You can observe in your backyard. You can observe on your balcony double stars. You can observe in the city. So that's cool. Anywhere, anytime. So double star observing, again, is very accommodating. It's very flexible. If you are observing in the backyard or, again, from your balcony, just watch out for bad seeing induced by rooftops. The buildings, especially in the summertime, will absorb a lot of heat on their roofs, and you'll get sort of artificial bad seeing. The air will really waver there, but regardless, you can observe in any location. So that's cool. Now, if you're looking for some source material, as I mentioned, the Observer's Handbook has a couple of tables in it. The first table that's noteworthy is the double and multi-star table, and it has over 135 entries in it. And if you look closely at that table, you'll notice that there are year columns. The current year and next year, the previous year, I forget which way it goes, but there's 2 years noted. And what they're referring to are binary systems where the star, one of the stars, is moving. So you can see in that table how binary systems are dynamically changing over a short period of time. There's another list in the Observer's Handbook, and it's eye candy. It's a collection of 100 colorful double stars. And there's also a supplement list that's available on the RASC website for that. So there's a bunch of targets that you could go after if you want. The magazines, of course, they have often articles about double stars. All of the magazines generally talk about this. Sky and Telescope, though, is clearly a big fan of double star observing. They regularly have articles. They have a lot of material on their website, stuff about getting started. They have some lists that you could use as checklists, including one for summer and one for winter. So it's quite neat. And I just recently looked back through the Sky and Telescope index or catalog of all of their issues, all their articles, and I found articles going back to 1956 that are on double stars. They regularly talk about this. So lots of resources there. And I was very honored when they wanted to include one of my photographs in the August 2017 issue of Sky and Telescope. There was an article about double stars visible with binoculars in Draco. So again, a lot of times they feature stuff by constellation, so that's cool. The evening sky map, you familiar with this? Have you seen this? This is this free downloadable, free for personal and public use, downloadable sky chart that has the monthly sky map, a calendar of upcoming events, but it's the page 2 that I wanted to draw your attention. They have targets broken down by equipment: eyeball, Mark 1 eyeball, binoculars, and telescope. In the binocular and telescope list, number of double stars are in that. So that's monthly oriented. That's very nice. So check that out. Lots of good items there. I mentioned the Astronomical League, and they have certificates that you can pursue. They have a binocular program. Their basic binocular program has 120 suggestions, and you only need to report on 50 minimum. They have an advanced binocular program for double stars. Again, there's 100 choices. You only need to report on 50. So you can get certificates with AL on binocular double star observing. They have a telescopic observing program. It has 100 suggestions on it. You have to report on all of those. Now, a little heads up with the Astronomical League program, you need to include with your log notes that you submit, you need to include a sketch of each subject. Now, that'll make some people nervous right away. Oh, I don't want to sketch things here, but arguably the sketch that you would do for a double star is the easiest type of drawing. Get out your pencil and do 2 dots. Done. There's your double star. There's a quick sketch that I did of 36 Ophiuchi. And the double star proper, you can see, is the 2 stars close together, just up and right of center. So it's easy to do double star sketches as well. And mine's quite crude there. If you're referring to atlases, you will often find there are circles that have a stick. It looks like a lollipop, or there's little Saturn images everywhere. That circle with the stroke through it is an indication of a telescopic double star. See, there's one there, there's one there, there's one over there. Do you see those little icons? So that's an indication that when you put your telescope on that particular object, you're going to see 2 stars very close together. Over here is Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 in Scorpius. And you can see there's individual circles for that. So that's a wide double star that they're showing there. So your atlases will generally show double stars by using some sort of convention like that. That's from the Cambridge Atlas of double stars. It's a very nice book. You can have a look at that if you'd like. So classic, chart atlas thing. And then there's lists of double stars in the latter part of that book. And perhaps the most famous book on double stars is Sissy Haas's Double Stars for Small Telescopes. And this has over 2,000 entries in it. And you can view all of these with a 3 or 4 inch scope. They're all those subjects are under magnitude 8. So easily done. You'll find my book is very dog-eared, lots of check marks and some notes in it. So I'm still working through that. I'm at about 1,200 viewed double stars now. Software, of course, if you use software and you look at a double star, it might just seem as one blob, and then you zoom in and it splits apart. 2 stars come apart. So you'll see that in Stellarium, you'll see that in Sky Safari. The snapshot that I'm showing here is from Sky Tools, and when there's known orbital information about a binary system, it can actually plot the orbit and show you the dates where you can expect to find a star at a particular point in time. So that can be helpful. You can see that B star of HD 102476 is drawing closer to the A star. So it's going to get harder and harder to see over time. You can see that software is simulating the colors there as well. AstroPlanner, a competitor to Sky Tools, has similar sort of plots. So a lot of software can help you track down double stars pretty easily. Just wanted to briefly mention the designations that are used for double stars. You've seen some of them already. A famous double star observer from the 1800s, Frederick Struve, his double star catalog has many entries in it, and they're often shown with the uppercase Greek sigma characters. So you'll see sigma followed by some numbers, and that's a particular double star. A 3-letter code is also used, STF. But Struve double stars, there's lots of those that you can look at. Family member, Otto Struve, you can see the O with the sigma is used, or STT for that. So there's lots of catalogs. I won't go through all of them there. But I do want to draw your attention to Burnham. Burnham's double star catalog uses beta, and that's not to be confused with the beta star of a constellation. So if you see Beta Cephei, that's presumably the second brightest star in Cepheus. But beta followed by some numbers is a double star from the Burnham catalog. So watch out for that. It's a bit confusing at first glance when you see the beta being used. So lots of designations are used for these. I've been suggesting that if you look at double stars, that you keep some notes about them. I encourage you to add them to your observing programs. And your note, I don't know if you can read those notes, but there's remarks about the color and how close or tight the stars are. And you can see the person did a little sketch. See, how hard can that be? So nice little sketches there for all those double stars with the date and time. And remember to note the equipment that you used, what eyepiece you used, or if you use more than one eyepiece, what your view was like in each one of those. It may be quite different. The colors may change from eyepiece to eyepiece. And note your sky conditions and so on. Try to assess the seeing conditions that may be a factor. If you want to note the positions of stars, there's a formal way that you can do that, but if you're just starting out, just maybe use a clock face. That the B component was at the 3 o'clock position. That's perfectly fine. So maybe start adding, again, double stars to your observing sessions and keeping some notes about them. Again, you don't have to split these double stars, so there might be ones that you want to return to. So again, keeping good log notes about that you couldn't split it before, but then you've successfully done it on a later visit, that'll be good. I've given you some suggestions for double stars already, but here's a few more, another dozen. All my notes, by the way, are on our website, so you'll find that suggestion list there. And the images that are here are of a couple of these subjects. The top left one here, that's Mizar and Alcor. You may know or be familiar with that multi-star system. That's kind of cool because it's one you can see with your naked eye. Most people can see a star blob with their naked eye and then a very faint one near it with just their eye. They're very close together with your naked eye. But you put binoculars on it and the Alcor star moves away from Mizar. You put powerful binoculars or a low power telescope on it and Mizar breaks into 2 stars. So that's a very rewarding multi-star system. It works well at low power, medium power, high power. It's fun to look at. Can you see it? See it? Can you make it out? Can you make out the teeny weeny faint companion to Sulafat? So I took that image with my DSLR, and there's that faint secondary star. It's almost impossible to see that. You can't see it with your eye, but it shows up nicely in a photograph there. So again, that shows you a very unequal pair of stars in terms of brightness. And speaking of unequal, this is T Draconis. Look at those colors, just fantastic. So that's, again, taken with a DSLR. So one-shot color, that's going to be pretty similar to what you see with your eye. The last star that I have on the list here, 70 Ophiuchi, that's one of those fast movers. So that's a double star that has an 88-year period. So every year that you go back to it and look at it, it's going to be in a slightly different position, or they're drawing close together or coming apart. So lots of suggestions there for your consideration. Those are some fairly easy ones. Excited? Interested? So if you don't regularly look at double stars, I encourage you to do that. I think they're fun. They're beautiful. They're dynamic. That's another thing about these, that some of them are fixed and static, but some of them are moving. So that's a fun thing about celestial objects here. So again, consider adding them to your observing list. If you want more lists, I can give you other suggestions by location, by time of year. Keep your log notes up to date with details of the particularly ones that you can't split, so you can go back to them and see if you can improve on that. I'm often up at the CAO in the summer. If you want to look at some double stars together, I'm happy to share the view, or we can chase after some challenging or interesting targets. So I'm happy to help you if you have any questions about that. Again, I'm trying to sort of raise awareness a bit here with double stars. There's stuff that we could do in the future if there's interest. Well, I can do more talks. I can talk about how to measure double stars. I can talk about how you could compile reports and submit them to the Washington Double Star Database. I can share with you some of my adventures with respect to photographing double stars. And I'm even kicking around the idea of a workshop, a bit like variable star workshops, where we do a bit of theory and some discussions in the day, and then we can do some nighttime observing and put it all into practice. So food for thought. If your smartphone has a QR code reader, that'll take you directly to the web page where I have all these materials and some of those photographs. You can go to RASC-TO.ca and do a search for the word double or double star, and you'll find the article there. And I'm tooting my own horn there. If you want to visit my blog, you'll see lots of double star photographs and my life list with, again, just over 1,000 entries on that. So thanks for your time. So any questions for me on double star observing? I'll wait for the microphone to move around. Chris.
First of all, big thumbs up for the Cambridge Double Star Atlas. It's nice big charts. They're organized with the para-facing charts in the adjacent sky. And they've got all the deep sky objects as well. So it's a nice alternative to the Pocket Sky Atlas for, older eyes.
Yeah.
And
these charts are by Will Tyrion, who some of you may be familiar with. He did the Sky Atlas 2000 and so on. They're just lovely charts to look at. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the size.
Yeah.
Can you comment on procedures for reobserving and updating log reports briefly? So would you update a previous log of an observation? Would you,
No.
or do you have to put a reference to cross-reference it back, that kind of thing?
So my logging is done online. I just use Blogger. It's my logbook. That's what I use to keep all my observing information. So that's date-based. So that's not unlike what we would do with a paper log, right? That we record the date, the event, the details, the telescope, the sky condition, and so on. Then I have a life list, but I point that to the individual entries. And I have kind of a historical reference in my life list where I'll say, could not split it on this date. And then the next sentence is, I split it successfully on this date with this telescope. So I quickly summarize it in my life list, but I have linking that goes right back to my original log note with all the gory details. So my life list, I have quick notes about sort of what happened historically for things that I needed to revisit. I haven't done that well. I didn't do it well initially, but I'm correcting old log notes that are confusing. There's some that I go back and reread and I go, what was I doing? I can't figure it out. So some of those notes I have to really sort of tidy up, but that's how I do it. Yeah. Yes, hi.
My first visit to a telescope shop was Perceptor in Schaumburg, and I got there and I had to wait because John and Suzanne were helping somebody else. And then this other guy came and we got chatting and I said, well, this is my first time to a telescope shop. And I said, we chatted a bit and I said, what are you doing? And he says, well, I'm making a deposit on a 16-inch telescope, and he had something like $7,000 in cash for his deposit. And anyway, George Armstrong, and he lived somewhere near Owen Sound. I don't know if anybody knows of him. He did double star work, and he would observe stars that had been observed 100 years ago and measure the exact angle compared to north and the separation. And he said that would link together with the previous observations, and they could find huge amounts of information about the stars. And I just wanted to share that because it kind of made me in awe of what some people are doing in astronomy.
So thanks, Ron. That's something that I'm sort of hinting at maybe in this presentation, but didn't want to get into in a lot of detail. That is something very interesting to me about double star observing, that like what Andy talked about with variable star observing, all of us can do citizen science very easily in our backyard. So viewing double stars, particularly binaries, and how they move, and measuring that with some accuracy and then submitting that data is contributing to a body of knowledge. That data is managed by the U.S. Naval Observatory, and the Washington Double Star Database is the master list of double star observations. And when we measure a binary system and how the elements are moving over time, and we get a reasonable amount of data so that we can calculate the orbit, then when we do that, we can calculate the mass of those stars. And like variable star observing, that's very important data. That has a cascading effect. It helps us with the cosmic ladder measurements of stars in our galaxy and other galaxies and so on. So that's a higher level of working with double stars, but that's something that I'm moving into. I've done a number of measurement campaigns. I'm refining my methods. There's ways that you can do it visually. I'm trying to have repeatable, measurable data, so I'm doing a lot of this photographically. But you can also do armchair double star astronomy in that you can look at existing catalogs, say with Sinbad and Aladdin, and look at historical photographs, and then plot the position of those stars and how they're changing over time. So it's very easy to do. You don't even have to shoot the photos if you don't want. So that's something that I'm interested in. If other people are interested in that, we can sort of kick it up a notch and look at measurement methods, and maybe photographing them and then submitting that data for peer review. A group based in the US, the Journal of Double Star Observers, the JDSO, is one of the places as a clearinghouse for papers where you can submit your findings. Lots of students do this too, that you might be interested in. There's a lot of high school projects where they spend a weekend measuring a couple hundred double stars, and then at the end they submit a paper on that. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Adrian.
What's your normal process on a given evening? Like, do you sit there ahead of time and decide what you're going to look for, or you just go outside and just whatever's in the sky at the time?
So some of you know that I'm a big fan of the SkyTool software. Admittedly, very big fan of that. But that's astronomy planning software, and I have to do that. I have to do planning for my sessions. Early on, I caught myself just looking at the same objects over and over again, and then at the end of the evening, I was going, well, I didn't see anything new and exciting. So for me, I build up a list of things that I want to look at. And some of those are things that I've heard of, maybe from a magazine. There might be some targets, like a double star, that I want to revisit because I didn't split it before. And SkyTools has the ability to also generate a list of targets for me automatically based on my date, time, location, and the equipment that I'm going to be using. So I have a hybrid approach that I'll build an observing list. Say I'm heading up to the Carr Observatory next weekend. I'll build a list a couple of days before and add things to that. Some of them I'll add manually. Some of them I'll copy from old lists, and some of it will be automatically generated. And then that gives me a list of targets. And again, I already told you that if it's going to be a bright moon on that weekend, it's going to be mostly double star targets that I'll have in that list. And when it's a new moon weekend, it's going to be a lot of deep sky stuff, galaxies and so on, and the odd quasar, and then a few double stars that I'm trying to, finally nail them. So that's, again, it's a hybrid approach, but I'm using planning software. So SkyTools, AstroPlanner are some of the popular tools for doing that. They can do automatic list generation, and they can accept data from other sources, manually input if necessary. Yeah. Other questions? Do I see a question over there? Andy, sorry, you got the mic? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, let me make amends for my my previous presentation. I didn't include a double
I
star.
should hope so.
So let me suggest 12 links, which I was looking at last weekend. It's a nice telescope double star, but if you've got the eyes for it, one of the stars is a very close double itself. I think under 2 arc seconds apart. So it's a nice easy object and a nice difficult object all together in one.
So that was 12 Lynxes, did you
12
say?
Lynxes, yes.
Yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head if I've looked at that. But that's a neat thing about Multistar Systems is that sometimes you'll see a nice wide pair, very colorful and so on, and then you go, wait a minute, there's something beside the A star. What's that? So sometimes you'll discover or see other stars in the field. A lot of times when I'm imaging stars, I'll see faint stars in the background, and they may not be listed in my software, but then I'll go look up from the Washington Double Star database what's the official list of all the candidates in that system. And sometimes I've found or identified other members in a multi-star system that were very faint or very close to the primary. Yeah.
It is in the list in the handbook, so
Okay.
everyone should be able to find it.
Yeah, good. So there's a lot of systems like that. They work great at low power, and then you get a treat when you get good steady air, and you use higher magnification. And again, if you have a telescope and a boatload of eyepieces, you get to use them all. View double stars at low power, view them at high power. And when I'm sitting somewhere and I didn't bring my telescope, but I've got some binoculars, I'll go look for some double stars from a Muskoka chair. So that's fun. Question at the back.
What's the computer for?
Pardon me, can you repeat?
Computer for
What's the computer for?
Yeah.
Well, I can't do math anymore. My brain's really bad at math, so I need a computer to help me with that. And I'm doing my presentation. Did you see all the pictures that I did? I used the computer to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, good stuff. That was a great question.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Blake.
Thanks.
Great presentation.